This is Transqat. What is Transqat? Transqat is a safe space. It's a place for respectful conversations about transgender issues. It's a place for queer people to come tell their stories. I'm host Clare McCarthy. Welcome to Transqat. Here's a question for you. What do the following states have in common? Connecticut, Florida, Maine, Massachusetts, North Dakota, and Wisconsin. Not much, right? Well, these are the 6 states that recognize and celebrate Patriots' Day. This holiday, the third Monday of April, commemorates the battles of Lexington and Concord, but most folks in the Northeast just know it as Marathon Monday. The Boston Marathon has been run on Patriots' Day since 1897, with just a slight hiccup, thanks a lot, COVID, in 2020 and 2021. The start line is in Hopkinton, and at mile 13, as you approach Wellesley College, you can feel the roar of the crowd before you see it. At mile 20, in Newton, there's Heartbreak Hill, so named not because of its difficulty per se, but because of a legendary act of hubris during the 1936 race. At mile 22, you turn a corner and you get your first sight of the Citgo sign in Kenmore Square. In Kenmore, the crowd from Fenway Park is waiting for you, and a Red Sox home game has been scheduled to coincide with the race since 1959. And from there, it's just, come on, say it with me, right on Hereford, left on Boylston. Running Boston is a badge of honor. Unlike most marathons, you have to earn your way into it by posting a specific time in a previous marathon that year. Last year, the Boston Athletic Association announced the creation of a non-binary category for runners, and the category returns this year. Joining me today are Susie Cleary of the Boston Athletic Association and Danny Riordan, a runner who ran last year in this new category. Oh, there's the starting gun. We're off. Try to keep up. So, Danny, I just wanted to also impress you that I geared up for this interview.
Love it. Oh, wonderful. I thought about wearing my Boston jacket, but I wore it the last time I was here, and I was like, I don't want to be the person that wears the jacket every year.
It's like wearing a concert tee to the concert.
No, it's really allowable, though. The Boston office, the Boston Athletic Association, we wear the gear quite a bit. It's nice because it's even more relaxed than business casual, but it's sweatshirts, but we're allowed, to wear them because they're branded with the BA and Adidas. So yeah.
But Susie, the important question is, do you get a discount buying them, or do they make you pay retail?
Well, they do give us coupon codes from time to time, so that's always a nice benefit. And then with each race, we get a packet. Everyone on the committee gets a packet of the clothing that we're supposed to wear over the weekend. So there are some freebies in there, and I have I'm starting a collection of the different colors of the, gazelle or the cute colored sneakers. So I'd have one in every color if them free, but no, we have to pay for those. So
well, now that we've got the shopping part of the show out of the way,
right? Exactly.
Let me have you both introduce yourselves, and you can thumb wrestle over who gets to go first.
Hi, my name is Danny Riordan. My pronouns are they and he, and I am a Boston-based comedian, writer, and endurance runner.
We are, less than a month away from the race?
Mm-hmm. I am not running this year. I ran last year in the first wave of non-binary runners. It was one of the best days of my life. And this year I'm coming back not as a runner, but as a start line volunteer, as a part of the non-binary advisory board for the BAA, and as an organizer for Road of Rainbows, which is Boston's Pride 5K, which is happening this June.
My name is Susie Cleary. I am the Director of Athlete Services for the Boston Athletic Association. I've been with the BA for a little over a year and a half at this point. Previous to that, I worked with the BA as a outside consultant for technology. I worked on the technology team. So anything to do with results, data, expo, that type of thing, anything that shows the runner data, I kind of assisted with. Barbara Sacuso, who was the athlete service director previous that I had worked with for a while, retired. And so I was fortunate enough to step into her role. It's a challenge. and it's ever changing, and it's I really enjoy the athlete services side of things because I get to interact with all of the athletes, not on a daily basis, but certainly, I mean, via email on a daily basis, but certainly at the event. I'm at the expo, stationed at the solutions desk, so I get to really meet the athletes, so I feel fortunate, as opposed to some like of the operations team that are in charge of putting up the fencing or setting up tents and such. They don't get to interact with as many athletes as I do until race day, when everyone's around all of their things. So I'm fortunate in that regard that I meet the athletes.
Danny, let me go back to you. Last year was the first year that Boston offered a non-binary category, and you ran in it. I want to ask how you did, but first, let's just talk about how you felt, what it was like to be able to run as yourself.
So how did it feel? The short answer is it felt like one of the best days of my life. The Boston Marathon 2023 was my 12th marathon. So I had run 11 previous races in the female category and kind of as a different person. Running has always been an integral part of my identity. I've been running regularly for the past 12 years now. So it's something that I've never taken a break from, but it's something that had always lived independently from my ever evolving gender identity. I don't think gender is ever something for me that can be set in stone. It's something that continues to grow and change every day. And it's something that is a lifetime of self-discovery. So last year, the BAA offered a non-binary category for the marathon runners for the first time. And this was just an incredible moment, because for the first time, I could bring together a non-binary gender identity that didn't quite fit in the male or female category and bring it together with running, which is something that I have loved to do for most of my life. And to bring those two facets of my identity together into one space and one time, and to enter a race and run a race as the closest approximation of myself that I had, was amazing. I got my PR that day. I ran a 4:09:40, which was 20 seconds faster than my previous PR of a 4:10.
Oh, fantastic.
I know. And when I hit the right on Hereford, I started crying because I could tell that I was going to hit a PR. Then I started crying and I had to like slow down. I was like, no, I can't start crying now. And I just,
because you've still got a long stretch on Boylston to go at that point.
And turned that like left on Boylston. And there's this picture that it got published electronically in the Boston Globe of like that my sister took of me just making the stupidest face.
It's a great picture.
It was a really fun one, and made it to the finish line, and I just burst out crying, like sobbing, because it was such a momentous thing. For the first time in a race, I didn't have to choose a gender that would feel inauthentic. I didn't have to choose between running a race and being myself. I got to bring those two together, and it was because of the availability of a non-binary category that I could do that. Now, as we come up on a year later, I am actively transitioning. I am moving towards the gender of male. I'm on HRT doing that, but I would still stay in the non-binary category, because that's not just a category, that's also a safe space where I know that I can compete and I'm not going to be questioned, and I'm not going to be uncomfortable or kind of feel like I'm somewhere that I'm not quite ready to be yet. Non-binary categories are important for runners of all genders and of all walks of life and of all levels of transition, whether you're transitioning or not, to have a safe space to practice a sport that we love so much.
And I've got to imagine it is at all levels of running as well, that this is just as important to the elite athletes as it is to anybody who's qualified. That ability to be authentic really does carry a lot of weight, because running a marathon is designed to break your body. It is further than you should be able to run. So you're asking a lot of your relationship to your body, brain, body, spirit, to get you through 26.2. In the past, when those things didn't align for you, asking your body to do that thing, what did that feel like? And how did that affect your performance?
That's a really good question. I would say that's not just something that lives in the past, that's something that's very much in the present. I'm
Hmm.
training for the Paris Marathon that's coming up in
Oh,
3 weeks from now. It'll be my 15th marathon. And there is no non-binary category. It's a race of about 40 to 45,000 runners, and it's all male or female. And it feels strange and quite frankly uncomfortable to have to choose between male or female. At this point, I choose the male category because I am taking HRT and I am on testosterone. Not really that it matters because I'm not going to win, but it would be to me, it would be completely inauthentic to sign up in the female category. And it feels daunting to sign up in the male category because I still get clocked as female quite a bit. Being clocked is when somebody assumes your sex, your biological sex. So I get clocked as female quite a bit. My voice is still very high. My features aren't as masculine as I'd like them to be. And I'm blonde, so I have no facial hair. It is something that is intimidating and daunting and can border on insulting because then there's a pressure and even a need to have to assert, no, I am supposed to be in the male category. Yes, I am. Legally, I am a man. I shouldn't have to explain myself. But this is something that comes about when there are only two options. In the past, having to continue to choose female, even as I was identifying fully as non-binary and going by a different name, it's invalidating. It was always very sad to feel like the life that I was living as a proud, queer, non-binary person had to be completely mutually exclusive from a lifetime of running that I'm also very proud of.
Susie, since Danny brought up Paris, of the six big marathons, five of them now do have a non-binary category.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about how Boston came to be one of those five. Let me see if I can do it from memory. Berlin, Boston, London, New York, and I'm missing one.
Chicago.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did Boston come to this decision for last year?
So I started in July 2 summers ago, 2022, and planning for registration certainly is on its way at that point. But when I started, it was one of the first conversations that I had on my first day of work with Jack Fleming, talking about, because as athlete services, director of athlete services, one of my primary roles is managing the registration process. So our qualified athletes register in September. So the summer is busy preparing for that. And then we have invitational entries and charity entries that register later in the year. So the qualified field is the first to register. And so that's what we were preparing for. And Jack was talking to me about, new things that were priorities and such, and non-binary was certainly one of them. And we already had non-binary in the distance medley events, which are our distance medley is the 5K, 10K, and half marathon. The Boston Marathon is unique in the fact that we have qualifying times.
Right.
And previous to the 2023 Boston Marathon, we had male and female qualifying times. And so the question was, what are the qualifying times for non-binary? And so really my first question was to the technology team, like how much work, now that it's July and we have just till September to launch, what is the work that goes into adding the third radio button for non-binary? That's step one. Can we technically do it without crashing the system?
But how many people are you talking about? What is the field like for Boston on a given year?
Well, the field size in total is 30,000. So, and we have about anywhere between 22, 23, 24,000 qualified athletes. The rest are for the charity athletes. But I mean, this past year for the 2024, we had over 30,000 people apply at the point of qualification. So we had to cut a significant amount of them. Unfortunately, it's really painful to do because that many people ran fast enough to qualify. But our field size, we can't accept them all because of the field size. So technically that was my first question. Do we have time to implement a new radio button, which sounds simple, but a new radio button means new divisions and a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes. So once the technology team said, absolutely, we can get it done before September, then, we started to have more conversations about, okay, if we're going to do this, what are the qualifying times? And so I did reach out to a few non-binary athletes who had participated in other marathons and bent their ears about those questions. And in the end, we landed on the non-binary qualifying times being the same as the female qualifying times, primarily because it's the most inclusive. As Danny just mentioned, non-binary, there's a good handful of reasons why people would choose non-binary. There's not just one formula that makes someone choose non-binary. So to try to define exactly, which category why are you choosing it and what's your qualifying time based on that, we just wanted to be able to open it to as many as possible, whatever the reason is you're choosing it. So that's why we landed on it being equivalent to the female qualifying time. So, that has worked very well. I still support the strategy. I think it's the better strategy to have. So that's really how it all started. And once we had that decision made, we would just move forward from there.
So the clicking of the radio buttons, that's up to the athlete to self-identify.
Yes. I mean, we have, our policy is that you have to, and this is across, all gender scenarios, that you have to qualify under the gender you register for. We make some exceptions with non-binary because not all marathons offer the non-binary option. But, for a trans athlete, if they were moving from male to female or female to male, they just need to run a marathon under the gender they want to participate in Boston as, and then submit that qualifying time. And it's considered a qualifying time. We don't really ask about 3 years ago. We don't look in to see if there was a different gender years before. We look at the current qualifying time and what they participated as in that event. So,
I spent more than a few years worrying about my qualifying times. So
how many times have you run the Boston Marathon, Claire?
I've run 3, once with a charity and then twice legitimately. 2013, which was I was about 100 yards from the stuff that happened that year. And then I came back and ran it in 2014 just to clear my head. Yeah.
Sure.
So it was all it's an honor. It really is. You earn your way into Boston. You feel a sense of camaraderie, a sense of accomplishment, just getting to the start line in Hopkinton, that it's like, okay, I've achieved something.
Right. And that's true across all athletes that participate. I mean, the charities, they get there, even though, they may not run the qualifying time, they get there raising so much money and doing so much good for these organizations. So, we feel that about, all of our athletes, but I agree that it's a feather in your cap once you get to the start line.
Absolutely. Someone, I wasn't paying attention about 10 years ago and someone stole my knees. I no longer have knees. And so I haven't run in 10 years, but that was a huge chunk of my identity. And Danny, this is what we were talking about a couple minutes ago, is that to run a marathon competitively, as opposed to, hey, let's try this, it requires, a 4-month commitment of training. You're invested in terms of gear and time and energy. It becomes a part of who you are. There's that old joke of, how do you know if your coworker is a marathoner? Just wait 5 minutes. Yeah, they'll tell you all about it.
And it's true, running distance like this, you're not just going out for a run once a week. It's not just a fun run. Your entire life orbits around running. And if you're running Boston and qualifying for it, that's, at least an 8-month commitment, because you have to commit to qualify and then commit to running it. And that's so much time and energy and money. And it's a shame to have that divided from who you are as a person. Being able to bring these two huge pieces of a person's life together, it's amazing.
I've had a feeling at the start line, and usually I was pretty good about being focused, but I have had that moment at the start line of like, what if I could run this race as me? Because I've only been out about 7 years and been transitioning for that long, and anything that distracts you during that 3-4 hour chunk of time is going to diminish your results. So thoughts that divide body from mind were deadly for me. And you really had to sort of push that out. Don't think about that. That's not what you're here for.
And not thinking about it is already a difficult thing. And then you add in that now you're going to spend 2.5 to 4.5 hours, depending on how fast you are, trying to not only stave off the fact that the identity that everyone is seeing is not the identity that you feel is true. And the fact that everything hurts and like your body's chafing and it's probably raining. Because why wouldn't it be? Why wouldn't it be? And there's so much else there.
There have been Bostons that were like in the 80s as well, where they had to set up those sprinkler things. Yep. It is devastating on your body, and that's where, when you get to the elites, they are able to refine everything into that one effort. That's all that exists there at that point.
Are you familiar with the short distance runner Nikki Hills? Either Claire and Susie.
I know the name.
I do too.
Last year's winner of the non-binary category at Boston mentioned Nikki in an interview I was reading.
Oh, so that's Kay Ravichandrahan. She's great.
Yes. You know her? Yeah.
I do. I met her last year, but she was super cool. So Nikki Hills is a non-binary, I think short to mid distance track runner. And I've been following them for a couple of years because a few years ago they came out as non-binary, and they were one of the very first athletes in professional sports to do so. And since coming out as non-binary and really finding that community in support in their identity, they have been crushing it. They're winning titles like left and right. They are winning races. And in reading some interviews and a lot of their Instagram captions, they attribute a lot of it to finally being able to compete as themselves, as Nikki, and as non-binary, and just bringing those things together. And I think that speaks a lot to the point that we were making earlier of how do you adequately compete in a race when you're trying to push away or not think about your identity, or your like gender identity is not at all involved in the race that you're doing, which is taking over your whole life. They are someone that I would really recommend reading up on because they're just incredible.
One of the infinite number of just lifetime memories that running Boston includes is that moment in the corral. And I don't like being crowded in. I'm scrunching up as I say this. But there's something about that moment of being in the corral with people who are all running at more or less the same speed you are. Was there a non-binary corral? And what was the camaraderie like there?
We didn't have a non-binary corral because everyone is corralled by your times.
By time.
And I, being corralled by my time, was like the last person to start the race. And that's fine. I still started. But at that point, they weren't really lining us up and then being like, okay, 3, 2, 1, gun. They were like, all right, come on, get over the start line. We got to start breaking down. We did have a non-binary shakeout run the day before, and we just organized it on Facebook. And I think 20 of us met up in Copley Square, and we did a 2-mile lap just over to the Charles, up the Charles, back down Boylston. And it was really, really nice to be with this group of people and be like, wow, we're the first. And also like, wow, in this extremely cisgendered and heteronormative sport, as most, if not all sports are, these are my people. These are also people that I don't have to explain my pronouns to. This is someone that I don't have to explain, like, yes, my voice is very high, but my pronouns are he, him. There's nothing else to say there. And it was wonderful to meet everyone and kind of talk about our stories, how we got here. We all went and got coffee after, and like we made friends. That's where I met Kay. That's where I've met a couple other people that I've since seen at other races and been like, oh my gosh, hello. That's how I met Alyssa, actually. Alyssa Moskaitis. She's also on the BAA non-binary advisory board. But it was wonderful to have that kind of community, albeit small, in this race that was meaningful to all of us for a lot of different reasons, but also for the same reason.
I've got to imagine that, in this age of social media, that cluster of people can lead to other contacts through social media, and pretty soon you're expanding your network exponentially just by this exposure to other folks like yourself.
It was really cool to see, like, oh, I'm not the only genderqueer person in running. There's actually a lot of us. I can rephrase that. There's actually a lot more than I thought. And hopefully, with being able to have the kind of visibility that having a non-binary category in such a major race as the Boston Marathon provides, that can kind of be a beacon of hope to other people that have wanted to get into running or maybe been into running and just haven't felt at home in running because they haven't felt like there's a place for them. Now we're starting to carve out a place for them, a place for us, a place for every gender to feel safe and confident in this community.
Susie, if we could just talk numbers briefly. How many folks were registered in the non-binary category last year, and did you see a growth this year?
Yes, just about doubled. So last year we had 25 registered by the end of it all. And this year, as of right now, 27. 25 were qualified athletes and 2 came in on invitation waivers, Danny being one of them. And then this year we had 46 qualify, and 54 is the number right now, and registration actually closed last week, so we have 54. So yeah, it definitely has increased. And as Danny mentioned, validating the non-binary gender, saying we're here for you, we have a space for you, I think has led to that number increasing. I love listening to Danny talk. Every time I speak to another non-binary athlete, I learn so much perspective and everything. And in talking after the original 2023 registration, since it was a small number of athletes, I was able to call each of them after they had submitted their registration in September. And I wasn't able to speak to Danny at that point because Danny registered later in the process. But what he's saying echoes so much of the sentiment across all of the conversations, was identifying and feeling more accepted by the race. Put the circle in the non-binary radio button, like just the radio button itself made such a big difference to these athletes. And then being able to meet other non-binary athletes, that they could connect with on both the running and the non-binary, and just feel so much more embraced and seen. That was the enthusiasm for that was overwhelming. It was really heartwarming to have all of these conversations and just feel like that it was just a radio button, that made them feel so much, more connected to the event. So we're really happy to have provided that.
Yeah, but that level of affirmation, can make a huge, just exponentially huge amount of difference.
Right. Running a marathon's hard enough as is. We don't want to put an additional burden on anybody.
What did you hear about the actual logistics of the race in terms of feedback from these 27 last year? What would you do differently this year? Have you made any changes?
Yeah, I did send out a couple of surveys, post-race surveys, as well as pre-race surveys, just so that we could be more prepared for any concerns or anything like that moving towards the event. After the event, we did a post-race survey that gave us all sorts of information. And so this year, I'm doing a better job as far as communicating with Danny and the advisory board's help as far as what information would a non-binary athlete coming from a city that isn't Boston, because my advisory panel is made up of Boston-based non-binary athletes. So they're familiar with the area. So they've been helpful in providing resources that a out-of-towner may want. So not only that, but what they can expect, where the gender-neutral bathrooms are, and setting up some expectations, and again giving them a line if they have additional questions that they can certainly ask for more clarification anywhere. So communication, better bathroom signage. We've added fields in registration so that if their preferred name does not match their legal ID, that, the volunteer will be able to manage that without, with a seamless process there, because I know that came up in the survey a couple of times, that the legal ID may not match the preferred name of the athlete. So we wanted to take care of that. And then in the expo area, we do have a panel where a non-binary athlete will be participating in the panel. And as far as training our volunteers, we did that last year, but we put more emphasis on it this year, as far as the gender inclusive language. And then also just more photo ops, afterwards at the award ceremony, make sure that there's representation in our photos as well. So those are some of the changes we've made for this year. The conversation is constant, and we're always talking about next steps and things we need to continue to think about.
Two things, I don't want to put you on the spot, but two things that Kay mentioned in this article was having a finishing tape for the non-binary winner, and then they also talked about prize money.
Sure.
Either of those change for this year?
Neither of those are changing for this year, but they're certainly always part of our conversation, and it's not specific to non-binary. It's any of the divisions that finish within the field of people. It's very difficult logistically to have a break tape. Sure. So it's not just that the non-binary don't have break tape. The only people who have break tapes are the ones that finish all by themselves.
Right.
So, it creates a hazard. It's dangerous to the other athletes, even, after, when the men are finishing, and you have to feed all the other runners to the right-hand side so that they don't get caught up in the photographers and the break tape and such. So there are some logistical challenges there as well. So, no, I mean, these are definitely topics, on our list of things to move forward on and figure out solutions. I think our general question right now is there are some challenges and limitations, and we've watched other races, how other races are doing it. There doesn't seem to be a race that has the perfect solution yet. So is there a perfect solution? What is the perfect solution? But our primary goal is, like, how can we continue to elevate the experience with each year? How can we, put more of a spotlight on it, validate the non-binary division more with each year? How can we, we have one panel this year that a non-binary participant is participating in. What can we do more in that category for next year? So we're always trying to find ways to elevate the experience and highlight it more than it started.
When you were talking about photographs and publicity, that I wouldn't have thought of that, but yeah, of course, if you have representation in the official publications from BAA, yeah, obviously runners are going to feel more included, more welcomed, more affirmed.
Right. Yeah. So as I told you in our pre-call, like I don't have all the answers to all of these questions. I think they're very legitimate questions, and they're things that we take seriously and are always looking to, listening, learning, growing, seeing what other races are doing, listening to our athletes, trying to collect as much information as possible and make the best decisions we can. So definitely it's moving, it's always moving forward.
Well, I think even though Danny's not running this year, I think you might want to consider giving them prize money just for the hell of it. So, Danny, if you've got a price, right, this is your opportunity, my friend. Jump in right now and give us a number.
Guys, you know what? I would sacrifice the prize money for more non-binary visibility in the official publications. I do think that is something that needs to be addressed and needs to be expanded in order to further the cause of non-binary participants. Because even though we have some incredible runners in the non-binary category, not just in the Boston Marathon, but nationally in different kinds of running, like see Nikki Hills, there is still no designation for non-binary professional athletes. There's no actual professional category for them. Nikki Hills, though they identify as non-binary, they're still competing in women's races and in the women's category in elite sports. And that closes a lot of doors for non-binary athletes to keep competing at an elite level. Right now, non-binary athletes do not have a space in the official press conferences because there is no professional designation for non-binary athletes, because there's no space for that. Having more visibility and having more space created for non-binary athletes is a positive feedback loop, in that it gives them more visibility, and then it also gives them more legitimacy in order to eventually become professional. This is not something that's going to stop at just creating a category and leaving it there. This is something that necessitates industry-wide change, and it's something that we're pushing for at all levels.
And hopefully beyond just that one sport. I mean, what you're describing is not endemic to running. That's, that's sports across the board.
Yeah.
The need to create space for non-binary folks. And I'll just use myself as an example here. I am a trans woman who doesn't necessarily pass. What would you advise me if I had qualified for Boston this year? Should I mean, I identify as female. I am fairly binary, and so I identify as female. Should I register as female or should I register as non-binary?
Yeah, I mean, my answer, and I'm not the like expert on this call. Like I said, I learn more every time I have one of these conversations. So I'm just trying to implement, the workflow with the Boston Marathon. So my answer to you would be, whatever you feel most whole as, what is it that, like you said, is going to make your body and mind function the best? Obviously you need to qualify. If you're going to register as a woman, you need a qualifying time as a woman. And if you're going to register as non-binary, then you need a qualifying time as a non-binary. So you have to think ahead, plan ahead on that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. And I've actually had it myself with some of the non-binary athletes that are transitioning. And I think from what I've heard from my conversations, that it really just depends on the individual. Like, is the eventual goal to register as the binary gender and you're just passing through non-binary, or will you always be non-binary? And I don't think that's our decision as the Boston Marathon to make. I think that's your decision as an athlete to make, based on who you are.
I mean, I want to get Danny's take on this as well, but there is such animosity right now toward trans women in sports that someone who looks like me running in the women's category might cause problems, not that I was ever that good a runner that I was displacing anyone from a podium, but that's got to be one of the things in my head is, am I signing myself up for trouble here? Would I be less likely, to get an adverse reaction from fellow athletes or from spectators or whatever if I just went with non-binary instead of what I know is true for me?
Yeah, and I hate the idea that other athletes would give anyone a hard time. I mean, I do agree that if you're of a competitive, professional level athlete, it's a much bigger question than if you're in the general field. But, my recommendation would be, I would want you to feel as whole as possible, and I would want you to choose the gender you're most comfortable with. But I'm interested to hear Danny's response as well.
So, Danny, if you and I were sitting down for coffee and I laid that out for you as a friend, what would you tell me?
I would tell you something quite similar to Susie, actually. I'm very familiar with the process and the deeply personal nature of transitioning because I am also transitioning, just going the opposite way. We high-fived as we crossed the gender binary.
We did, yes.
And this kind of decision is just as intensely personal as transitioning is. I don't feel comfortable saying what to do one way or another just as a general answer, because there is no general answer. For me, I am very happy when non-binary categories are there because it doesn't force me to choose. And that's how I personally see that space. If you were to ask me that, I would ask you, what is more important to you? Like, what is the most important thing that you want to get out of this race? Do you want to run a race that is completely aligned with your gender identity? Or do you want to kind of have the guarantee that you're not going to face any gender-based harassment, which of course being in a non-binary category doesn't guarantee that. But as you're speaking on the animosity that trans women get in women's sports, like that is very real. And that can be very, what's the word I'm looking for? Right now, I would say it's almost at a rabid level. It's really heartbreaking. So I somewhat see the non-binary categories in running as a safe space. And it's a space that in being there rocks the boat of normalcy, but it's the organization that's rocking the boat, and the organization is much stronger than an individual. So while having it there rocks the boat, it provides a space for all of us individual people that might not feel so comfortable in a category that aligns with our gender identity, but that might kind of bring on some harassment. It gives us a safe space to kind of be there and not be rocking the boat ourselves. And it's also getting into like my personal feelings on how I felt being in that category and having that category available. That is just me. That's not how everybody sees non-binary, because once again, gender and transitioning and gender identity are intensely personal experiences.
And having listened to you both, I don't know what I would do. I would keep talking to people, I think.
Yeah. And it evolves. Right now, I like having the non-binary categories. As I keep transitioning, I'll probably start registering more often in male categories and eventually move over there, and having that kind of like the stopover space, having a layover in non-binary before finishing my journey in transitioning has been invaluable in sports and in life in general. It's so important to have it there.
I'm sure there's a metaphor about marathons in there somewhere, but that idea that gender identity is fluid over time, it varies from individual to individual, so that even if you have this category called non-binary in your race, it doesn't mean that you've got 27 or 54 very, very similar people. Everybody's got their own journey of 26.2 miles. Yeah, that's it. I tried to make the metaphor and it didn't work. But yeah, that idea that it might change over time is important for people to hear as well.
I feel like there's often, just like on the grander scale of transitioning, I feel like there's this narrative that a person realizes they're trans, comes out as trans, and then the next day you come out as a fully formed and transitioned person. And that is not the reality. It's not just a coin flip, unlike what you see in pop culture, where it feels like celebrities go away for a little bit, come back, and they've completely transitioned. It's not real life. It's months and years of being in an in-between space. And sometimes the in-between space doesn't end. It's a transition, and it's a distance race. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It takes time, and it takes effort, and it takes, like I said, inhabiting this non-binary zone. And it's having the non-binary category gives space for non-binary people and for trans people that are in the midpoints of their transitions, in the beginning points, in the end points, just a safe space for all these people that look all different ways and identify all different ways to inhabit and feel secure.
And to continue with your metaphor a little bit, when I would run a marathon, that's a lot of time for me to get lost in my own head as the body systems are breaking down. And that could get to be a difficult place at times. That's not unlike the gender journey. Society wants us to just stay inside our own heads. And so, Susie, the work that you're doing and that the BAA is doing, that puts the spotlight on the community rather than the individual, which is what Danny was just describing. From somebody who is no longer a runner, thank you for this. It has real significance. So thank you.
Oh, well, you're welcome. And I appreciate you saying that. It's been such a positive journey for us as well. For me personally, I've learned so much, and I think the organization has learned so much through expanding to the non-binary category. And so it's been a win-win all around. We're really grateful, and we're grateful for Danny and the other athletes and the feedback and conversations they've had with me personally, as well as with other people in the organization. I really did want to, some point in this podcast, just thank all the athletes that I've spoken to personally, because the grace and patience and openness and heartfelt conversations I've had with so many of them have really impacted me personally. And again, the whole organization. It's really been amazing, the conversations I've had and how honest and open the athletes have been.
If it's not, if it wouldn't violate anyone's privacy, send me their names and we'll put it in the show notes so that people can check the finishing results, because I know I'm going to be cheering folks on this year that way, checking the progress, finding the splits, and yeah. So we do have I think in one of my surveys I did ask if people were okay with their names being, but I can confirm with them. And then certainly the results from last year, we have the results from last year as well. And a good handful of them are repeat customers, which is great. Danny, last question is going to you. What's your plan for Paris?
Oh, my plan for Paris. That is a great question. Do you mean like tourism plan or my running plan?
No, your running plan.
My running plan. Okay. So Paris is my 15th marathon, and somehow I convinced my partner to make it his first marathon.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yes. I can't believe he loves me that much. It's incredible. So Paris will be my first time running a marathon, not really for myself, but to be supporting someone else. And this is partly for myself. I work for the Fairmont Copley Plaza in Boston. We're a subsidiary of Accor, which is a Paris-based hotel chain. And my place of work was kind enough to sponsor my entry for Paris. While I'm there, I'll be working with Accor to talk about some of their DEI initiatives and the inclusion of non-binary identities in the workplace as well. So my plan is to do more of this, do more pushing for inclusion of non-binary people in racing, in the workplace and beyond. And then to toe the line the day of Paris, have an incredible 26.2 mile walking tour of the city. And maybe there will be some jogging in there too. And then make sure my partner gets over the finish line just 1 second behind me. That's important. But truly my plan for Paris, as is my plan for every marathon, I'm not moving fast. I'm having fun. It is the joy of running that makes me come back time and time and time again. It's the joy of distance running that has pulled me back to my 15th starting line. And it is the joy of being on that course, surrounded by people that love running just as much as I do, and just breathing that in every step of the way.
Hey, we made it to the finish line. Congratulations. Wrap yourself in a foil blanket, grab something to eat and drink, but keep walking as you go through the chutes. I wanted to remind you that the Goodspeed Opera House is putting on a new musical called A Complicated Woman. It'll run May 10th through June 2nd at the Terrace Theater in Chester, Connecticut. I've been fortunate enough to serve as a cultural consultant to the show, and I am very excited to see it all come together. Get your tickets now at goodspeed.org. Also, friend of the show Sam Avery and I are starting to work on the return of game night. More details as they emerge. This has been Transqat. I'm Clare McCarthy. Thank you for listening. Let's talk soon.
This is Sadie McCarthy. I'm Claire's niece.
And you've just been listening to Transqat. It is made by one of my favorite people in the world, Clare McCarthy.
Transqat is a production of Transqat Enterprises, LLC.
Copyright 2023, all rights reserved.
Join us on the web at transqat.com.
That's TRANSQAT.com.
QAT.com.
QAT.com. There you'll find links to Transqat, the blog,
writing projects,
speaking engagements,
and our PayPal donations page.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monkeys.
Monies.
Your monies.
Your monies.
Not monkeys.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monies. Any monkeys will be gratefully received as well.
Follow Transqat on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
On TikTok, we are @TheRealTransCat.
Want to tell your story on air?
Or ask Claire a question?
What is the deal?
She has all the answers.
Or suggest a guest or topic for an upcoming episode.
Use the contact page at the website
or email her directly at crmtranscat@gmail.com.
crmtranscat@gmail.com.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye.